to our ATX Alive Potluck. Hope you enjoyed your meal. And it's really wonderful to be here together the third Sunday of every month. And just really glad that we have such a thriving community of people who are interested in health through plant-based food. So thank you very much. And because I have such a lengthy presentation, I thought I'd get started right away. And there is our wonderful president, Patty Fallow. Let's have a round of applause for her. Thank you, Patty, for tirelessly helping us to gather speakers. And we have a website, atxalive.com. Hope that you'll check it out. And we have a YouTube channel. And we also have a Facebook group, ATX Alive, but we also have a private Facebook group. So if you'd like to be in the private Facebook group, that's just a little more intimate than the one that the face that we show to the public, and you're welcome to ask us for membership there. And we have one of our co-founders is in need of a tenant to rent out her delightful apartment, and I'm going to ask her to come up and give the details. It's in a really, it's a cute apartment. I've been there. It's in a great subdivision. Here's a mic.
That's okay. I'll bend it down. So it's in the northwest part of Austin. The rent is $1,310 a month, but as an incentive for somebody to take it over, we're actually giving you $1,800 cash if you take over a lease by November 1st. So if you're interested, come talk to me or IM me on Facebook. And then since I'm up here, the in-house oil-free. So we have several restaurants that have been nice enough to provide oil-free options, vegan oil-free options on their menu. And ATX Food Co., is anybody familiar with that food truck? Woo! So they just went completely oil-free. So everything there is vegan oil-free on their menu. And then Zyka Contemporary Cuisine, where if any of you've been to our buffets there, they're actually doing their own vegan oil-frees that aren't buffets. And you have to watch for it on Facebook, but it's usually every other Sunday there. So they're doing it every 2 weeks, all on their own. And then there's also Counterculture and the Beer Plant. And
Astor's Ethiopian
Cuisine. And Casa de Luz.
Oh,
yes.
Yes. Wonderful, thank you. And we want to thank Susan Elizondo. She is a wonderful optometrist. The name of her practice is Westlake Hills Vision Center. And if you need eye care, she's the one. And she has done a wonderful job in getting so many of the restaurants in Austin to be not only vegan friendly, but oil-free vegan friendly. And in this talk that we're going to enjoy right now, we're going to talk about why it's important to be oil-free. So if you have questions about that, we're going to talk about that. But we're going to cover quite a few subjects, but we're going to start with a true and false question. So, and I'm trying to think of a good one. So, picture there's a couple and they're trying to conceive a child. Now, I want you to raise your hand if you think this is a true statement, what I'm about to say. So do we have a scientific study that shows if that couple drinks caffeine in the 2 weeks prior to conception, do they have an increased risk of miscarriage? Raise your hand if you think that they have an increased risk of miscarriage if they have caffeine every day, the husband and the wife, in the 2 weeks prior to conception. Yeah, they do. They do have an increased risk of miscarriage. And today in our talk, we're going to talk about some of the scientific underpinnings that show that yes, a vegan diet is great, but a vegan diet is not enough. There are some other lifestyle factors that can factor in to help you to be even healthier than if it's just vegan. And many people come to veganism for the animals, for compassion. Many come for the environment because the environment is being so trashed by animal husbandry and many other aspects of eating meat, dairy, and eggs. But many people also come for health, and that's our focus here at ATX Alive. So we're going to talk about the connection between fitness and fiber and hormones, because we all want to be fit. We don't want to be breaking bones and ending up bedridden in our senior years. We want to be fit all of our life. We want to know what is the connection between more fiber and more fitness, because we can't out-exercise a poor diet, can we? Fiber is found only in plant foods, and 80% of our health is influenced by what we eat and drink, according to this study by Dr. Cummings. And the more fiber, the more testosterone a man is going to have. Actually, women too. Women have a little bit of testosterone. Fiber prevents excess estrogen, which excess estrogen suppresses testosterone in both men and women. And we're going to look at some of the science today as to why that is. And we're going to look at 8 lifestyle factors to reduce our risk for cancers, and we're going to reduce our risk for type 2 diabetes, our risk for obesity and overweight, risk of depression and anxiety, low testosterone, and problems with women's health caused by excess estrogen, which suppresses a man's testosterone. The problems in women's health we're going to look at are dysfunctional uterine bleeding, leading to unnecessary hysterectomies. We're going to try and prevent that and prevent PMS, premenstrual syndrome, and premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Let's talk about fiber. Fiber is our friend. It's found only in unprocessed plant food. So we don't really want to remove it by juicing the plant food. We don't really want to blend up that fiber, cut it into 1,000 pieces in a blender blade, because then it can't do its job. And there's 2 kinds of fiber. There's soluble fiber, which swells up in water when you cook it. Think beans or brown rice, they swell up in water. And soluble fiber stabilizes cholesterol. It lowers blood glucose levels, and it's found in plants only. There's no fiber in eggs. There's no fiber in cheese or milk. There's no fiber in meat, the flesh of animals. No fiber in fish or seafood. Then there's insoluble fiber. Insoluble fiber cleans out your colon. It prevents constipation, and it makes you feel full, because bulk is what it takes to provide satiety. And satiety is that full feeling, and fiber plus water makes bulk. But because fiber adds no calories, fiber is the weight loss wonder. So if you have plenty of foods with plants that fill you up, then you can eat and feel satisfied, as you have just done, hopefully, and still lose weight if that's a need for you in your life. So Dr. Dennis Burkitt said, the less fiber, the more disease. And to that, I add, the less fiber in the diet, the worse the estrogen imbalance. And so Dr. Dennis Burkitt was a missionary surgeon in Africa, and he studied rates of colon cancer in native Africans. And he found that because there's no fiber in meat, fish, dairy, eggs, oil, he found that there was more colorectal cancer in the Africans who ate less fiber and more meat. Dr. Burkitt is also famous for discovering the cause of a pediatric cancer, which is now called Burkitt's lymphoma. He discovered the etiology. So who knows what the word etiology means? Cause, yes, cause, absolutely. Okay, so I add the less fiber in the diet, the more estrogen, our own bioidentical estrogen, which suppresses testosterone in men and women. We don't want to suppress our testosterone. We want more of it. So this study by Dr. Golden says the less fiber, the more estrogen. And so why is that? The liver is like a washing machine, and 24/7, the liver is taking out of the circulation the things that it doesn't want in there. And one of those things is excess estrogen, the kind that we make ourselves, our own bioidentical estrogen. So the liver takes the estrogen out of the bloodstream, sends it down a little tube called the bile duct, and it dumps it into the intestine, where it's hoping for a sponge called fiber to soak up the excess estrogen and carry it out with the stool, the solid waste. If there's no fiber or insufficient fiber, then the intestinal villi, which line the intestine, reabsorb that estrogen, and they put it back into the circulation. And we'll see why that's a bad thing, but that's called enterohepatic circulation. Entero means intestines, where the estrogen is getting reabsorbed, and hepatic, that means liver. So back it goes around, the liver has to work twice as hard. Okay, so Fiber is an estrogen sponge. Like a paper towel called Bounty, fiber is the quicker picker-upper. And the more fiber in the diet, the more estrogen is excreted in the stool. According to this 1972 study, yes, there is a higher estrogen content in the stool of whole food, plant-based, no oil, vegans, because the fiber has taken the estrogen out of their blood. And aren't you glad that it's not your job to measure the levels of estrogen in stool? I'm glad that that's not my job, but I'm glad that there's researchers willing to do that. And so, Dr. King analyzed dietary fiber trends from 1999 to 2008, and he said to eliminate excess estrogen, you've got to eat enough unprocessed plants. And his quote is, a Western diet is unlikely to bind estrogen to fiber, permitting the reabsorption of estrogen into the bloodstream. So we've known this for a long time, since 1972. And estrogen excess has many problems. When it's overproduced, estrogen can promote growth out of control. Okay, so estrogen is a growth promoter. Without estrogen, no fetus would grow, no breast would grow, no cancer would grow. Growth out of control is cancer. And according to this 2006 study, the role of estrogen in the initiation of breast cancer, we know that the less fiber, the greater the risk in the diet, the greater the risk of breast cancer. And so in 1991, Dr. Rose did a study saying high fiber diets reduce serum estrogen concentrations in premenopausal women because we need that fiber sponge to carry out our estrogen out of the body. So if we raise dietary fat, we raise estrogen levels also, and we increase our cancer risk, according to a famous study called the Harvard Nurses Health Study 2. And a high-fat diet increased the risk of breast cancer 18% among all women, but among postmenopausal women, it was 21%. Estrogen excess also increases premenstrual syndrome and premenstrual dysphoric disorder, according to this study. Near the end of the cycle, estrogen levels in the bloodstream of women are at their highest in their non-pregnant state. And so it's essential that we get enough fiber, plant-based diet, to prevent cramps and moodiness and bloating and all those things that can plague women in their menstrual years. And then for quality of life, the estrogen excess can increase your risk for depression, anxiety, insomnia. Quality of life is very important. So I'd like to talk to you about women who are in prison for murder. And a study was done asking the women how many of them committed that crime in the 3 days prior to their period starting. A great percentage of them, more than 80% of the women who were in prison for capital murder committed it because their estrogen, possibly because their estrogen levels were so high. Now, these are some beautiful vegan twins named Nina and Randa Nelson, and they wrote a great book called The Clear Skin Diet. In the first picture with the acne, they were vegan, but they were eating a high-fat, oil-filled diet because it's not enough to be vegan. And so they found that by eating a low-fat, oil-free vegan diet, they could have the skin of their dreams, and so can you. And estrogen excess can lead us to dysfunctional uterine bleeding. The less fiber, the heavier the vaginal bleeding. And as a woman passes her mid-30s and gets into her 40s, many unnecessary procedures and hysterectomies are needed because she's eating the 8 factors that I'm going to tell you about that over-estrogenize her. And excess estrogen also increases the risk for diabetes type 2. High-fat diets cause more diabetes than do high-sugar diets. You see, every muscle cell has a door, and insulin has the key to that lock in muscle's door. But if you eat dietary fat or animal protein, it's as if gum is dried in the lock, and insulin's key won't fit. So when we eat oil, even if we're on a vegan diet, we're blocking the door to the muscle, and that leads to insulin resistance, which is the underlying mechanism of diabetes type 2. It leads to higher blood sugar levels. Okay, so way back in the 50s, Ansel Keys started his famous 7-country study, and he found that for every additional 10 grams of fiber per day, there was a 17% lower risk of fatal coronary heart disease. And he did this over 40 years of follow-up. Basically, the more fat in the diet, the more coronary heart disease in his study, and the less fiber in the diet, the more heart disease. And then along in the 1970s, along came Ken Carroll from the University of Western Toronto in Canada, and he took the data from Ansel Keys and he correlated the intake of animal fat, dietary fat, and breast cancer. And so I made a little graph to sort of let you know that there are certain countries with very low intakes of dietary fat and very low breast cancer. And there are certain countries like the Netherlands and the USA with very high rates of dietary fat intake and much more breast cancer, which is one of the reasons why I don't eat oil in my diet. And then along came T. Colin Campbell, PhD, from Cornell University, who wrote the famous China study along with his son, and he correlated the more animal protein in the diet. He took Ansel Keys' data, the more animal protein in the diet, the more cancer. And you can see that the graph for dietary fat is basically identical with the graph for animal protein. So, what are some of the problems of excess estrogen? When estrogen is excess or dominant, you can have acne, cancer, blood clots, hypertension, testosterone deficiency, infertility, PMS, heavy vaginal bleeding, uterine fibroids, cysts of the ovaries, cysts of the breast. Am I against estrogen? No. Last time I checked, still a woman, not against estrogen. But estrogen is like a fire. And how is it like a fire? A little bit of fire in the right place is a good thing. But too much fire out of control can be a disaster. And estrogen is like a two-edged sword because it's a powerful promoter of tissue growth. The two-edged sword, a good edge and a bad edge. And a key component of mother's milk is estrogen because the baby needs to grow. So estrogen can be a very good thing. But in fact, at a time in life when we need mother's milk, that's when we're growing the most rapidly. However, when we are overgrowing, growth out of control can lead to cancer, can lead to heavy vaginal bleeding. So, estrogen is like fertilizer because it promotes cell growth, and estrogen is kind of like lawn fertilizer if the uterus lining is the lawn, and it makes cells grow, but growth out of control is cancer, and we don't want that. And I'm not talking about just the obvious hormonal cancers like prostate and breast. I'm talking about skin cancer, thyroid cancer, brain cancer, colon cancer. So if estrogen promotes cell growth and too much estrogen promotes overgrowth and too much of that is cancer, how does it relate to heavy vaginal bleeding, which can be the first sign of uterine cancer? It isn't always, but it can be. The endometrial lining, that's the lining of the uterus, it thickens, and this is more common after age 35, and estrogen levels are high, and that suppresses progesterone levels. Okay, so what lowers progesterone? Why do they get low if estrogen is too high? Foods and beverages can also make estrogen in our body from fat cells because it's not just the ovaries that can make estrogen. We can over-estrogenize ourselves by what we eat. And that excess estrogen sends a signal to the ovaries, okay, dampen down your production of hormone. But then the ovary, it overdoes it, and it dampens down the production not only of just estrogen, but also progesterone. So it suppresses the production of both hormones, and thus it suppresses progesterone, and then the bleeding goes out of control. So here is a picture to let you know the inside lining of the uterus is like estrogen is like lawn fertilizer to it, and progesterone is like lawn mower keeping things trimmed. And so if you have too much estrogen and not enough progesterone, you're going to have bleeding, more frequent bleeding. So it's not every 28 to 30 days. It's maybe 2 periods in a month, longer days, heavier. And young women can come into my practice on a vegan diet, and yet if it's a very high-fat vegan diet, they can already be anemic even in their young, teenage years. And we want to reduce the risk of unnecessary hysterectomy. It's not that hysterectomy is the end of the world, but intimacy can be less pleasurable. The tissues are narrowed, dried, more fragile, less able to accommodate. And the lack of uterine secretions flowing through can mean that you're more prone to infection. And of course, hysterectomy is expensive, it's painful, and there's time lost from work. So let's take a look at the science of how similar estrogen, cholesterol, testosterone, progesterone look. These hormones, especially the cholesterol and the estrogen are very interchangeable. And cholesterol is only found in meat, dairy, and eggs. We make in our bodies the cholesterol that we need. We don't need to get it from our food. And when you eat too much cholesterol from the foods that you're eating, then you can make excess estrogen. So doctor, do I need a blood test of my estrogen level? You may not, because your blood estrogen level may fall within the bell-shaped curve of normal. In the USA, almost everybody is over-estrogenized, and I'll tell you why when I talk about the 8 factors. And estrogen at the cellular level matters the most, because you see, estrogen is, it's not water soluble, and when we draw blood, we're taking the watery part out. Estrogen is stuck to the cell wall, and so you can't really measure it very accurately, so you may have a high level of estrogen at the cellular level, but not be able to detect it. It falls within the bell-shaped curve of normal. And in this country, that bell-shaped curve is very broad to include where the population is, not necessarily where the population should be. So, I wanted to let you know how that excess estrogen relates to real patients in my practice who come in and their complaint is, I'm a man, I have low testosterone. Every newly vegan man, he comes in, he's not vegan when he meets me, but he adopts a diet without meat, dairy, eggs, and then if he cuts out the caffeine, the alcohol, the oil, his testosterone levels rise. If he has intact testicles so that he can still make testosterone, his testosterone levels will rise. And you notice that I put a very bold word there, every single man that I've tested this for in my practice, I mean, that's just my experience. I'm not saying every man in the world, but hey, the ones that come to me, if they have testicles and they go vegan and they let me test their testosterone, always rise. And isn't that great? Cancer is on the rise. It's among the leading causes of death in females as of 2015, and it's even more now. Cancer is quickly catching up to heart disease as the leading cause of death, and it has already become the #1 cause of death in some racial groups. 10 years ago, it was 8 Western states that it was the top cause of death. Now, that has now risen to 15 states in the US. So we think that by the year 2030, cancer is going to be the #1 killer. And the science shows that the less animal protein we eat, the less over-estrogen you make, and the less breast cancer. You have lower rates of breast cancer among vegan women in the Adventist Health Study 2, which is a long-running study with lots of people in it. And in 2012, this was published in the journal Cancer Epidemiology, which is the study of causes. The more animal protein, the more estrogen, the more breast cancer. According to this is a different study. This is the Four Corners breast study. Even fish. Many people say, well, hey, I just eat fish. It's so healthy. But even fish raises the breast cancer rate and the estrogen levels, according to Dr. Wu, who published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The more Asians eat fish, the more cancers, despite the fact that one of the blue zones where people live a long time is in Asia. In fact, there's only one blue zone that isn't shrinking, and that's the blue zone where people live a long time. A lot of people live to 100 in Loma Linda, California, which is the home of my medical school, Loma Linda University. The more fiber, the less estrogen imbalance, and the less breast cancer, according to Dr. Dong's 2011 meta-analysis of prospective cohort studies. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put you to sleep with all this scientific, but prospective data, that's really good data. And a meta-analysis analyzes many different studies. So we've got really great evidence to show that a plant-based diet is where you want to be to try and avoid cancer. Okay, I apologize for how busy this slide is, but I want you to know that vegans are not getting dementia because of a deficiency of omega-3, but because oils in the vegan diet of some vegans who are not oil-free promote vascular changes that clog brain arteries. You're going to get all the omega-3 that you need if you're going to eat leafy green vegetables at 2 different meals a day. You don't have to eat nuts and seeds with your salads in order to absorb those nutrients. That is faulty science that's been put out there. And it's not good to take supplements, whether of vitamins or omega-3, but the supplement industry is an $11 billion industry, and it's sort of built on the fact that many people would rather take a pill than change their lifestyle habits. And 67 trials analyzed in a meta-analysis. This was published by Cochrane Reports, which is highly respected. They don't take advertising, so they're not beholden to anyone. And in 2008, they found that if you're taking vitamin E supplements, you have a 74% increased risk of hemorrhagic stroke. Whoa, wait a minute. Vitamins are good things. How could that good thing, a vitamin, do such a bad thing like hemorrhagic stroke? But that's what the science says when the vitamins are in supplement form. And when you take vitamin A, there's an 18% risk of liver cancer. And this study showed it by Dr. Sesso in 2008. Plant foods, when you take the beta-carotene, which is the precursor of vitamin A, it decreased the risk for cancer by 19%. Caffeine consumption is a big factor in breast cancer. When people realize that drinking caffeine or eating it in the form of cacao raises their estrogen, and estrogen being a growth promoter, it raises the risk for breast cancer, not just of estrogen receptor positive cancers. This is prospective data relating caffeine consumption to breast cancer. And I love Dr. Ishitani's 2008 study. What he did, it was published in the Archives of Internal Medicine, and what he did was he looked at benign breast disease. So he took women who have benign breast disease, lumpy fibroid breasts, and he was studying them for their breast cancer risk. And he found a dose-dependent relationship. The more caffeine consumption in any form, the more breast cancer. Especially the more coffee consumption, the more breast cancer. And they had breast cancers that had a worse prognosis. Receptor negative breast cancer, which is, it's not positive for progesterone receptors, it's not positive for estrogen receptors, that's a worse prognosis, and they had more of those kind. And they had bigger tumors, and that's a worse prognosis. So I really appreciate Dr. Ishitani's work. Let's talk about adenosine, which you may not have heard. Adenosine is the most potent vasodilator in the body. What does vasodilator mean? Picture an artery. If it dilates, that's vasodilation. So low flow states, when you don't have vasodilation, that fosters cancer initiation. And so this is a quote from Dr. Wolfram: antagonism of the adenosine receptor is the most plausible mechanism by which caffeine acts, especially with regard to the growth of carcinomatous human breast tissue. So back in 1980, is a long time ago, they realized the connection between caffeine, adenosine, and cancer. Caffeine blocks adenosine, and caffeine increases the risk for heart attack, because if those arteries are narrowing and less blood is going to the heart muscle and less oxygen, because blood carries oxygen, you're at higher risk for heart attack if you have caffeine. And so caffeine is metabolized in the liver by one of the cytochrome P450 enzyme systems. And this is the CYP1A2 enzyme. And interestingly enough, that same enzyme system is responsible for metabolizing three things: caffeine and adenosine and something else. And I'll tell you what in a moment. And in summary, with most case control studies, they found that increased coffee intake is associated with an increased risk of non-fatal MI. MI means myocardial infarction. That's a heart attack. Hey, but they found that only among slow caffeine metabolizers. So some people in this country are rapid caffeine metabolizers, but 90% of us are slow caffeine metabolizers, which means the more coffee, the greater the risk of heart attack. Okay, this is the famous biocycle study by Dr. Karen Schleip when she was at the National Institutes of Health. She found that caffeine intake raises your risk of estrogen. And so this was published in 2012 in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Caffeine causes excess estrogen because they share the same cytochrome P450 system. Remember how I told you that the liver is taking out things it doesn't want, like excess estrogen? If the liver has to stop its work of doing that and deal with caffeine, then that estrogen is going to slide right on by and not get taken out, so it's going to rise. And this was done, a study of more than 250 women, which is a fairly large study. I mean, it's not thousands, but it's a pretty good study. And they were consuming the equivalent of 1 cup of coffee a day. So It's adenosine, it's caffeine, and it's estrogen that share the same cytochrome P450 system. And 1 cup a day of caffeinated soda or green tea was associated with higher estrogen levels in 3 different races: Asians, whites, and blacks. And she studied people from 2005 to 2007. And the estrogen is high just before the menses. When are the chocolate cravings the biggest? Right before the menses, right? And so our body is, we can't rely on the cravings of the body for what's good for the body. Because when your estrogen levels are highest, when you need to balance it the most, and you eat chocolate or cacao, which has caffeine, but yes, theobromine, you're making it harder, and you're making your risk for PMS worse by eating that chocolate right before the period. And that worseness can demonstrate cramping, acne, fibrocystic breast disease, and emotional disturbances. Caffeine intake has been associated with an increased risk of osteoporosis, breast cancer, endometriosis, fibrocystic breast disease, and it has been hypothesized to exert its effects through alteration of endogenous hormone levels. Okay, I know that's stilted scientific language, but the Rancho Bernardo study is telling us that endogenous hormone, that talking about estrogen. So long time ago, we knew that it rose. But then in 2012, when Dr. Schleip did her work at NIH, that just really sealed it. Okay, so Dr. Benjamin did a study of women with lumpy breast disease, which is a very common thing. 69% of women attending a gynecology clinic had breast pain each month, which we call cyclical mastalgia. Lumpiness, heaviness, swelling, tenderness, pain. And they found that reducing the dietary fat to less than 15% of calories and increasing the complex carbohydrates helped the women have less pain and breast swelling after just 6 months. So then the researchers want to know, okay, is it the more fiber or is it the less dietary fat? And what they found, I mean, you know that fiber sweeps excess estrogen out and prevents it from recirculating, but these researchers found that in this study, yeah, okay, fiber is good, but it was the drop in dietary fat that really helped the women, and that's another reason why I don't eat oil in my diet. Okay, now it's time for a stretch break. I want everybody to stand, and I want everyone to raise. Thank you very much. Okay, over to the side. Excellent, excellent. Is it too warm in this room? Do we need to turn the temperature up? Okay, good. I know. All right, I'm gonna let you sit down. I know this is heavy science. Thank you for sledding with me for the heavy science. Okay. All right, so now we're going to look at the 8 factors that cause excess estrogen. Dairy provides us with too much estrogen. There are more than 7 estrogen precursors, that's the building blocks, in cow's milk. And cows in this country are milked throughout their pregnancy, because how many of you think that cows give milk because they're cows? No, cows give milk because they got pregnant and they became mothers. That's why cows give milk. And in the non-pregnant cow, the units are about 17 units of estrogen, but in the pregnant cow, it's up over 1,000. In this country, they milk them all the way through their pregnancy. And then just imagine how much more when they inject them with that hormone, RBST. And so, according to the researchers, estrogens are unavoidable in non-vegetarian human nutrition. In other words, in the standard American diet, you can't escape getting over-estrogenized if you're eating meat, dairy, and eggs. Milk contains lots of estrogen, which is a growth promoter, and that's great for growing a 60-pound baby calf into a 600-pound yearling in just 1 year. And that's great for cows' babies, but not for human babies. The more milk, the more osteoporosis. And what you want to do to prevent osteoporosis is you want daily weight-bearing exercise and daily sunshine. The factors that promote excess estrogen are dairy, eating too much fat, wearing too much fat in our body, and eating cholesterol. You saw the link between the cholesterol and the estrogen. The lack of fiber in our diet. This is why I eat such a high fiber, bean and vegetable filled breakfast, because I want to start balancing my hormones from the get-go. Drinking caffeine raises estrogen. Animal feed contains hormone and antibiotics. Drinking alcohol leads to too much estrogen. Now, how would drinking alcohol lead to too much estrogen? Where's alcohol metabolized? In the liver. now you know about the cytochrome P450 system. If you distract that enzyme system from taking the estrogen out, then the estrogen is going to slide right on by because the body has to quickly metabolize that alcohol so that you don't, drink yourself under the table and, and faint. All right. 80% of the antibiotics produced in this country each year go into the feed of healthy animals, and many of them labeled organic. Factors that create too much estrogen, wearing too much fat. What I'm going to do for you now is I'm going to run through those 8 things, and I'm going to show you that we've got good science that clearly shows this. And just a little reminder, eating cholesterol raises estrogen levels, it suppresses testosterone levels, and high serum cholesterol suppresses a man's testosterone and a woman's testosterone too, and leaves her with insufficient libido. Eating too much fat raises our estrogen. This is another study, Journal of Clinical Oncology. How much is too much fat? When fat represents more than 20% of our calories, we may create excessive estrogen and promote cancer. And I'm indebted to the people at the Engine 2 Immersion, because by getting to be hired as the medical director by Rip Esselstyn, a former firefighter. He's from Austin. He's the son of Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn Jr., MD. In this picture, you can see the taller doctor is Dr. Esselstyn, and there's Dr. T. Colin Campbell. By lecturing alongside them, I learned so many things that can help so many of my patients on a real level. If you haven't seen this movie, Forks Over Knives, please watch it. It's a game changer. It is a wonderful movie to help people to understand the connection between health. And speaking of game changers, how many of you have seen The Game Changer? Wow, isn't that great? And so it's on Netflix, thegamechangersmovie.com. So you can watch the trailer there, thegamechangersmovie.com. It came out on October 16 on Netflix, and it's talking about some of the strongest, most successful athletes in the world being vegan. And Patrick is there, and I won't attempt to say his last name. And Patrick he's the strongest man in the world, and he's often asked, how can you be as strong as an ox when you don't eat meat? And he says, have you ever seen an ox eating meat? And I love that. So it's a great one. All right. And so at the Engine 2 Immersion, we took 100 employees at a time from Whole Foods Market, and we brought them to a beautiful resort camp just north of Austin, Texas, and we fed them a diet without meat, dairy, eggs, and oil, alcohol, and caffeine for 1 week. And my staff drew the blood on Monday and Friday, and we measured their weight and their blood pressure, and we got some fantastic results. We saw total cholesterol levels come down 100 points in 5 days. And forgive me for those of you who have heard me say this so many times, because there's new people every month. Could I have the new people raise their hand? How many new people for the first time? Isn't that wonderful? And thank you. Absolutely. And so for those of you who are faithful and you've heard me say this thing over and over again, I appreciate your support, because you come and you bring food and you invite friends. Other people can find the superior health that you have. And these people ate all that they wanted at the Engine 2 Immersion, and they loved the food. And you can help them. This is my friend Shirley, and many of you know Shirley. She's been here and to achieve better health. And Shirley is continuing to lose. When Shirley realized that she could fill up on low-calorie concentration foods, you can see in this chart that there are foods above the line, and if you eat the veggies and fruit and whole grains and the beans, split peas, if you eat that, you're going to have lower calorie density, you're going to fill yourself up. But there are vegan foods, and I've listed quite a few of them underneath the line: avocado, dried fruit, flour, meat and fake meat, junk food, nuts, seeds, coconut, avocado, and oils. They're very concentrated in calories. And so you can actually gain weight and make your cholesterol levels worse by eating those high calorie concentration foods. So just a little case in point. Take a pound of brown rice, 550 calories in that pound of brown rice. That would probably fill your stomach, right? But if you take that same brown rice and before you cook it, you grind it into a flour. Now it's tiny, small particles. The fiber isn't the long chains of stickiness that it was. It's now unable to make the carbohydrates go in, bit by bit. They just flood in all at once. And that flour is concentrated. You've taken out the water, you've put it into a small package, and now it has 1,450 calories per pound of brown rice flour. So you can see that even though brown rice flour is vegan, you're going to be able to eat a lot more of it because you can pack a lot more in. But you want to be like Sam here, and Sam feels better. He's got better brain functioning, better mood, and you are the ones that are helping them. Those of you who are longtime supporters of ATX Alive, thank you for inviting people here and bringing them. Calorie concentration, you can see that some stomachs are not very full at all, and they have the same amount of calories as a stomach full of fruits and veggies and beans. The more concentrated the calories, the less room it takes up in your stomach. So that stomach that over on the side that has olive oil, it's not taking up enough room. It's leaving you nearly empty, and you don't have satiety. Olive oil has about 4,000 calories per pound, so it doesn't take very much of it to be just 400 calories. Peanut butter is vegan, but still leaves you hungry. It doesn't fill you up enough. Chicken or even fake chicken won't fill you up enough. You're still unsatisfied. But if you fill your stomach like we just did with whole plant foods low in fat, you feel very satisfied and you can't hold another bite. And that's what we want. Because being vegan is not enough. You want to eat more and weigh less. And this is my Start Smart system to help people do that in my solo practice in Buda, Texas. And it's just another way of looking at the calorie concentration model. And here's another way showing you the relative calorie concentrations in the food. And this lady makes a living impersonating Liza Minnelli, and she is suffering here on the standard American diet. It's almost hard to recognize her after her adoption of the low-fat, oil-free vegan diet. And she has a better quality of life now, and I'm just really proud of Barbara. So let's review all the ways that oil harms us. Why is oil unhealthy? The fiber has been removed from oil. It's too dense in calories, vegan though it is. It's just fat. There's no protein, no carbohydrate. It's so easily stored as adipose tissue from the lips to the hips. That's where fat and especially oil goes. It promotes acid reflux. Now, how does it do that? If you had a sink full of soapy water and you dipped a dish in it, it would come out, cleaner. But if you put a bunch of olive oil on that soapy water and then you dipped a dish in, that dish would come out coated on both sides with a little tracing of oil. Now imagine that that's your red blood cells, and there's this oil in the arteries and veins, and your red blood cells have that little coating of oil there. How much harder is it to exchange your oxygen? So the higher in oils your diet is, it's harder to exchange the oxygen. How much harder is it for the water-soluble digestive enzymes to break down the food when the food particles are coated with oil? And so your food is going to take longer to digest, and it's going to start to ferment, which causes gas and bloating and reflux. Let's talk about mental health. I see a friend, Adam Sutton, and I'm going to call him out about how much hope he found from anxiety and depression and insomnia by adopting a plant-based diet. And when he did so, he had the same genetics that he always had. He was raised, that didn't change. And those are the two factors in the 10 depression hit categories that we can't change, genetics and developmental. But if we exercise, that's our lifestyle factor, in the fresh air and sunshine, that can even be better for depression, anxiety, and insomnia. And then circadian rhythms, getting to bed before 10 p.m. We're going to have much better mental health if we can get to bed before 10 p.m. And of course our nutrition, as Adam so aptly demonstrates. And then the toxins, getting the lead, the mercury, the arsenic, the bismuth, and many of these toxins are coming in through animal products. And then there's addicting factors, alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, drugs like pot. These can increase your risk for anxiety. And I want just to mention about pot here. Pot makes you feel less anxious in the short term. But many of my patients say that they got off cannabis products completely because they found that they were developing an anxiety and insomnia disorder the longer they used it. So they say, I don't do that anymore and I have way less anxiety. And then, of course, social factors lead to anxiety and depression, divorce and loss of a spouse. But the frontal lobe, this is our self-talk. And if we go for truth therapy, if we tell ourselves the truth, we can overcome. There are ways that you can teach yourself to overcome the hopelessness, jumping to conclusions, overwhelming yourself, labeling yourself, having low frustration tolerance. And cognitive behavioral therapy says that thoughts and beliefs create feelings, and out of feelings flows behavior. So if you're struggling with cravings and addictions, get your thoughts and beliefs right, and a trained counselor who does cognitive behavioral therapy as their primary mode of therapy can be very, very effective. Let's talk about how plant-based diets can make you happier on a biochemical brain chemistry level. The monoamines are our feel-good neurotransmitters: serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. But there's an enzyme called monoamine oxidase, and it breaks down our monoamines. Boo, we don't want our feel-good chemicals broken down, do we? Well, a plant-based diet dampens down monoamine oxidase naturally by, there are certain foods especially good at it: apples, berries, onions, grapes, and oregano. Serotonin is your feel-good hormone. It's stored in your pleasure center, so how can you make more of it? Well, tryptophan is an amino acid precursor of serotonin, but you shouldn't take tryptophan supplements. You should get it naturally. But the problem is foods contain a lower amount of tryptophan compared to the other amino acids. So all the amino acids are knocking at the door of the brain, and there's a barrier, a gate called the blood-brain barrier. How is little tryptophan going to win the race when it's outnumbered? There's so many other amino acids. How can we get enough tryptophan into our brain to make serotonin? Because it's a building block of serotonin. So let's put it to the test. They gave the test subjects a high protein meal that caused tryptophan levels in the brain to go down. They gave them a high carbohydrate meal, and that led to tryptophan levels in the brain going up. High carbohydrate meals cause serotonin levels to go up, according to Dr. Wartzman. So here's how you can get your share. Eating a carbohydrate-rich meal boosts insulin levels. Insulin's key unlocks the door to the muscle. And so all the amino acids get called over to the muscle, away from the brain, to get sucked up by the muscles for fuel. And with the other amino acids called away from the blood-brain barrier, little tryptophan becomes first in line to cross the blood-brain barrier. That's how carbohydrate-rich meals cause your brain levels of tryptophan to go up and thus increase your brain levels of serotonin, your feel-good chemical. So, it's really true, animal protein meals make you less happy, and especially in the long run. Plant protein meals make you more happy. Now, animal protein meals may make you feel great because they're so stimulating, but the long-term overcoming of anxiety and depression, the studies show very clearly that a plant-based diet helps quite a bit. It's really true, greens do trump the blues. And there are other studies showing that the less veggies, the more veggies, the less depression. And actually there's many studies that show this, but this study said that eating veggies preferentially may cut the odds of depression by as much as 62%. Do supplements work? The studies show no. When you supplement in pills or powders or liquids, it's not been shown to prevent disease. It's not that you need to take in folic acid, which is a key component of every prenatal vitamin. I ask the patients in my practice not to take prenatal vitamins when they are considering getting pregnant or they're already pregnant. I ask them to eat leafy greens at 2 different meals a day because folic acid in pill form, supplement form, increases the risk of breast cancer in the female, 153%. Also in males, increased risk of prostate cancer. Do foods affect moods? According to the, this study by Dr. Bezold and Seventh-day Adventist, vegetarian diets are associated with better mood states. How might that be? Arachidonic acid is an omega-6 fatty acid, and it's an inflammatory fatty acid. And the principal sources are chicken, eggs, meat, and fish, but especially chicken and eggs. And they may, just one egg can significantly boost your arachidonic acid levels. And omnivores who eat meat, dairy, eggs, they consume 9 times more arachidonic acid than those eating plant-based diets. And that's one of the ways that inflames their brain for insomnia, anxiety, depression. And an interventional study showed that when they took meat eaters and took away their chicken and fish, within 2 weeks, their mood improved. And this is the people themselves reporting. So it wasn't, researcher bias, it was the people themselves filling out the questionnaire. Plant-based diets are best to reduce depression. This is the famous Geico study by Neil Barnard. And in 10 workplace locations across the country, they took the overweight diabetic employees and they encouraged them to follow a whole food plant-based diet. And they had to do it on their own. They weren't cooking the food for them, but the cafeteria did start offering some vegan, veggie minestrone soup and other options. And there was no portion control, there was no calorie counting, there was no carb tracking, and they were specifically told not to change their exercise habits. The researchers wanted to isolate the effects of diet on mood and energy level. And then there was a control group of employees, same company, and they were given no dietary advice. And after 5 months of the study, what do you think happened? Plant-based diets were best to reverse depression, and they also improved their body weight, their blood sugar levels, their cholesterol levels. They felt better, less fatigue, more productive, better sense of well-being. They were just functioning better. And this was a wonderful study published in 2013 by this wonderful author. Those of us who are aging, I'm 59 years old, we really would like to have our memory preserved. And this book is a wonderful cookbook that will tell you the science of how a plant-based diet will help you to face your golden years without losing those marbles. Is overeating a risk for depression? The study says that it is. The results from my practice is that I see people with less osteoporosis as measured on DEXA studies from year to year. When they cut out the meat, dairy, eggs, oil, alcohol, caffeine, DEXA studies improve. And I'm not talking about this artificial improvement just by getting more arthritis, which can artificially make the bones look denser because it's going through bone spurs. Asthma improves. That's my own story. When I cut out the oil, even though I was a vegan already, within 1 month, no more asthma, better pulmonary function. Less diabetes type 2. I would like to again call out Adam Sudd. He's part of a coaching program called Mastering Diabetes. Yes, he is. And wave your hand, Adam. Everybody got to see it. And this is a fantastic program that gives hope to type 2 diabetics and it holds their hand through many weeks of just how to adopt this. How do you do this when you're traveling? How do you do this when you have to entertain clients in a restaurant for a living? And what do you do if you don't have family members who support your way of eating? That can be very hard. And he's a coach that can help you to know how. Say it again?
We also work with type 1s.
And he also worked with type 1 diabetics. Type 1 diabetics are not going to get off their insulin. They don't make any and they always need it. But their levels of insulin that they need to inject every day are going to go down. And insulin is so expensive now. When I finished medical school in 1986, insulin was just so affordable. Now it's $300 a vial. It's crazy. And the more insulin that the type 1 diabetic has to inject, the greater the risk of brittleness. Too high, too low, too high, too low. People can have seizures if blood sugar goes too low. So it's much better for the type 1 diabetic to be an oil-free vegan without caffeine and alcohol to mess up their blood sugars and cause insulin resistance. And if you eat plants, you're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to reversing many different diseases, such as diabetes. And this study by Dr. Tonstead in 2009 shows that glucose in the bloodstream turns the artery wall sticky. That's why diabetics plug up their arteries at a rate 20 times faster than non-diabetics. And the pancreas burns out because it's overproducing insulin. I measure fasting insulin levels in my patients who come to me who are not overweight, they're young, they're standard American diet eaters. Many of them have sky-high insulin levels, and they're not even feeling any problems, and their blood sugars are still normal because their pancreases are working overtime. But then you get into middle age, and that pancreas is slowing down and burning out, and suddenly the day comes that you don't make enough insulin, and then you need medicine. So, to avoid modern diseases, you want to avoid the modern diet, which is meat, oil, dairy, eggs, refined foods, like putting it into flour, and narcotic foods. When I say narcotic, I needed an N word, okay. I'm talking about mind-altering substances such as caffeine and alcohol, which can again destroy health. And so, if you have seen the sequel to Forks Over Knives, it's Plant Pure Nation. And at plantpurenation.com, you can watch that movie for free. And this Potluck group is a pod of the Plant Pure communities. And there we are, ATX Alive, and here you are. This picture was taken in this very room, and we're just grateful that you come and support us. So you can connect with me on social media or my websites. Veggievore.com is where I have some videos for sale, and oh man, and we stopped at the office today and brought them, and Sean, I don't know if we even put them out. Wanted to. Anyway, we have some videos for sale about these things, but we always forget. And in closing, I'd like to talk to you about B12, which is important. Only bacteria can make B12. Plants can't make it, animals can't make it. And so many vegans really ought to supplement. The World Health Organization asks everybody over age 50, no matter what they eat, to take a B12 supplement. And you want to take it in the morning so it won't cause insomnia. And caffeine is a diuretic, and B12 is a water-soluble vitamin. And there are lots of B12 deficiencies among my non-vegan patients who are heavy caffeine and alcohol users. The caffeine may affect the fertility. It may delay conception among fertile women, and this was consistently observed in the American Journal of Epidemiology in 1997 among all countries studied. Even men's fertility can be decreased by caffeine. Drinking caffeine increases the risk of pregnancy loss, and the study found that goes equally if you're miscarrying. It's whether the husband or the wife had caffeine. And this is a quote from Dr. Jermaine Buck-Lewis. There's something about drinking caffeinated beverages that is associated with pregnancy loss, and that comes out of the National Institutes of Health. Men's fertility also decreased by caffeine. Drinking 3 or more caffeinated beverages a day raised the risk of early pregnancy loss by 74%. And that held whether the women drank before conception or afterwards. But in the life study, they were more likely to miscarry if the husband and the wife had drunk caffeine in the 2 weeks leading up to conception. So once they did conceive, if they stopped, they still had a higher risk of miscarriage if they had 2 daily caffeinated beverages. And that study was published in Fertility and Sterility. Just one more study from the Life Study, Longitudinal Investigation of Fertility, and the Environmental Study. Caffeine is found in green tea as well as black tea, and the difference between them is that the green tea is the bud and the top 2 leaves. They contain the most methylxanthines. Theobromine is a methylxanthine found in cacao. To turn green tea into black tea, you add bacteria and you ferment. And so the bacteria are eating everything nutritious out of the green tea leaves, leaving you with a vile, bitter tasting substance that's loaded with caffeine. That's black tea. The caffeine remains, but very few nutrients are left. So people use the antioxidants, which are not eaten out by the bacteria, in green tea. They use that as a marketing, hey, antioxidants, antioxidants. Well, newsflash, there's antioxidants in all the plant foods, and so that's a good thing. And you don't need green tea to get them. But researchers can bias the studies, and they can put into the group where the green tea is drunk, they can put the younger, premenopausal, more likely to have higher income, higher educational attainment, more likely to eat fruit, vegetables, soy, and no wonder the group that got the green tea looked better in this study. Cacao contains 55% of its calories from fat coming straight out of the cacao. And to make it into chocolate, cacao is naturally bitter. You gotta add sugar. And to overcome the natural grittiness of cacao, you have to add fat. Most of it is saturated, which is a risk factor for cancer and heart disease. And if you add milk chocolate, which of course is not vegan, it's even more addictive because the casein binds with our endorphins to make casomorphines, and that's just bliss. And milk chocolate is very addictive because of it. So why are theobromine and caffeine in plants if they're so bad for us? Why are they in there? Well, let's picture the eland, the largest ungulate in Africa. And the eland grazes on the acacia tree leaves. And as the tree senses that the leaves are being cut or torn, it sends out a signal. This is a wind-borne signal called a pheromone, P-H-E-R, pheromone, and it makes the plant raise the level of bitter alkaloids in the plant, making the next bite that the eland takes astringent. And he messes up his face, oh, I don't like that. And so he has to wander down about 100 meters to where the pheromone hasn't had time to drift to the next group of acacia trees, and then he continues his meal. These bitter alkaloids are in the plant to prevent overgrazing. That's why they're there. But that just because they're in the plant doesn't mean that that's a plant that we should be eating. So what should our goals be? We should be plant-based, but we should try to eat less than 20% of our calories from fat. And we should have our foods as whole and unprocessed as possible, which means a minimal loss of water, because dried fruits are going to be much more calorie dense than whole fruits. No modification of the fibers. Juicers take out the fiber. Smoothies cut up the fiber. No added sugar, fat, or salt. That's one of the processing things that the food industry does, is add sugar, fat, and salt to make the food more addicting. And if we eat grains, eat them intact. Only whole grains, like whole oat groats, are better for you than steel cut. But steel cut is better for you than the old-fashioned rolled oats. And the old-fashioned rolled oats are better for you than the quick cooking oats, which are partially cooked and rolled. And then they're all far better still than the Cheerios, which is the flour. And I have some acknowledgments. I stand on the shoulders of giants, and there are many people who have taught me these things, and you can read their books. And if you want to find the scientific underpinnings, one of the best ones is a book called The Cancer Survivor's Guide, Foods That Help You Fight Back. And that's where some of the scientific studies, I first learned about them. So thank you so much. Success can be yours. I'm proud of you for learning about a low-fat, plant-based diet and how it can make you healthy by choice and not by chance. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Yes, Roz. Okay.
It's not a question. I just want to say thank you. We are so fortunate to have you in our community for your knowledge, your graciousness, your generosity in sharing all of this information. It's like 3 presentations packed into one. It's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What she said was, thank you for the breadth of the information and for the generosity of time. I appreciate that. Patty, did you have a question?
I did. Maybe once a week or so I'll see an article about some study that says when you drink coffee, you live longer, or you don't get heart disease as easily, or there's some study like that show. What's the counter argument to that?
Oh, I really like it. That's a great question. Her question was, why do you see so many studies touting the health benefits of coffee, the health benefits of coffee? Well, that's a backlash from an industry that doesn't want its addictive substance to have any smear on its reputation. They want people to get addicted to coffee because, hey, profits are up. And so I showed you one way that studies were skewed when, in the green tea study, when younger, more healthy, more vegetarian type eating people, higher educated, higher socioeconomic, when they were in the control group, you know that the science is not trustworthy because it's skewed. And so marketing is the science of elevating one good aspect of a product and completely hiding the other aspects. And there's huge money in coffee. There's huge money in alcohol. Case in point, the alcohol industry has taken great care to hide from the public the connection between alcohol and cancer. Big connection there. You drink 1 alcoholic drink per month, you've got a much higher, like a 33% higher risk of cancer. But the alcohol industry has set up studies in such a way that when they try to make you think that, hey, the moderate drinkers were more healthy than the never drinkers. Well, what they don't tell you is that the never drinkers are people who quit like 2 weeks ago. And some people quit drinking alcohol all on their own because they don't feel good. I mean, they realize that their health is deteriorating. They realize that they're having a problem here. So what made them an ex-drinker? And if you of course, the people who stopped drinking alcohol just 2 weeks ago might have health reasons why they were ex-drinkers, and they might look better. And I'll get to you in just a minute, Ken, thank you so much. But if you compare moderate alcohol users with never drinkers, and there are some people who have never drunk alcohol, the never drinkers blow the other ones out of the water when it comes to better health in all the parameters studied, better brain health and cardiovascular rates and diabetes and cancer. Yes, Ken?
They also use people who come from Alcoholics Anonymous.
Absolutely, Alcoholics Anonymous. Absolutely, so those are people who recognize, the people who go to Alcoholics Anonymous recognize that alcohol has become a problem in their life. And so, yeah, so you can set up studies to make your control group your experimental group good, and that is the way, the way that products are marketed. When you've got something to sell and you want blueberries to look like they're better than any other food on the market, blueberries better than pomegranates, well then you've got to sort of artificially make these distinctions, and there are companies out there that set up scientific studies to make your product look like whatever you want it to say. They'll get a study and they'll make sure you get the results that you need. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question about the whole issue regarding oil and fat. I've heard some people say, hey, you need to eat coconut oil, eat this. What would be your recommendations for men for balancing out our testosterone levels in terms of how much fat, a couple of tablespoons of olive oil, putting it on food or putting it on your salad, and just kind of keeping it to that, or what?
I'm so grateful that you asked. His question was, you see a lot of marketing about oil and how good it is for you, and shouldn't men use oil to boost their testosterone levels? Well, these studies that I have, they're on drcarney.com, and you can go and you can remind yourself that oil has no fiber, so it can't take out estrogen. So the more oil that you have, the more you're going to suppress your testosterone. The higher in fat your diet is, the more you're going to suppress your testosterone, the worse your health is going to be. But there's a lot of marketing that is backlashing, pushing back against this low-fat, plant-based movement to make you think, well, they're medium-chain triglycerides. Well, you need them. And one of the reasons for this backlash is in 2004, the food industry said, outlaw the trans fats. And the government said that to the food industry, outlaw the trans fat, no more trans fats. And the food industry said, oh no, we need something that will involve a stable shelf life. We need something that will be hitting the pleasure center, highly addictive, and something with a creamy mouthfeel so that people will just love it. So enter coconut oil. And it was after 2004 that the coconut oil hype just reached fever pitch, because that is what the food industry has used to preserve the shelf life of food, because bacteria are too smart to coconut oil is kind of naturally antibacterial, because the bacteria don't want all that saturated fat, more saturated fat than lard. And so it preserves the food, gives it a shelf life, creamy mouthfeel, highly addictive because it's high in fat. And the higher in calorie density a food is, the more the initial release of serotonin and dopamine. And so that's a pleasure stimulation, and it's highly addicting. But a man's testosterone will go up if he adopts this diet, low in calories, low in fat, oil-free, and free of animal products. That's my experience with every man who allows me to measure his testosterone levels before and after, and who has if he has testicles and he can make testosterone, they all come up. 100% of them in my experience. So that's pretty good. Yes, Nicholas?
Have there been any studies on the defatted powdered nut butters?
I don't know. And I know there's PB2 and other defatted peanut butter. And I think that if you're going to use that peanut flavor because you want your pad thai to taste authentic, and that's probably a better thing to use. Yeah, it's a little processed, but I don't know of studies on that. Yes, Nancy?
What are your top favorite cookbooks for this food plan?
StraightUpFoods.com, and it's free. StraightUpFoods.com, she is the one that is the most close to the way I eat. Her name is Kathy Fisher. Her cookbook is $35 and worth every penny. And there's brandnewvegan.com, free recipes there. Chuck Underwood has spoken at ATX Alive, and he's a great guy, and he's oil-free. And Chuck is into the comfort food, and that's good, because as the name of his website implies, Brand New Vegan, there's a lot of people that, hey, thanks so much for coming. Good to see you, Morgan. And there's a lot of people that don't realize when they first start this, oh, the food's too bland, it's boring, it's bitter, and they don't realize that their taste buds are going to change. And some of us, it takes a long time, 6 months to a year, but your taste buds will change. And the longer you starve your gut microbiome of the sugar and the high fat, the better your bacteria in the gut microbiome will be. And they send craving signals to your brain. Isn't that amazing to think that bacteria in your gut can send craving signals to your brain? But that's what the science tells us. And when you feed them fiber, that's their food. We can't digest fiber. We're not getting nutrients from fiber. But fiber is very essential in our diet because it's their food and it's the good food. And when you starve them of the refined sugars and you starve them of the animal protein, you're getting the better kind of bacteria. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned earlier in your presentation about Engine Tour of Whole Foods.
Yes.
Having a program in North Austin.
That's a program that used to be in this state, and now it's in Sedona, Arizona, and I am no longer the medical director because I don't have an Arizona medical license. So I'm sorry that it's not there. But there is my practice. There is food coaching consults that I sell at veggievore.com that people can get me on the phone. There's Mastering Diabetes that Adam just left, but he's a coach. And there's ATX Alive. So when people have a community of support, they're more likely to be successful because it's hard to do this in isolation.
I was looking for a program along the same lines of the immersion programs where you learn how to cook the food and
Yes.
prepare it.
Absolutely.
And
And
I don't find anything
because immersions are very expensive to run and they cost a lot of money. And so that's why it's in Sedona. Rip felt, I haven't read Rip's mind, but he felt that Austin wasn't a snazzy enough destination, and Sedona's so gorgeous, and it's pretty hard to compete with the natural beauty of Sedona, so can't blame him there. However, about how to cook this, that's why I love this potluck, because next time, come early, take pictures of the foods that look good. You'll get in that picture the ingredients list, and they'll give you a clue how to do it. And then go to straightupfoods.com, go to brandnewvegan.com, and those are free sites that can help you to understand how to do this. Roy.
Yes, Chef Karen Osborne is cooking classes.
Yes, I'm sorry, Karen. Chef Karen Osborne comes alongside you and teaches you how to do it. And Sharon, Karen, come on up and share with us. Don't you have it's probably sold out now, huh?
The next 2 Sundays, we're doing the cancer class, Neil Barnard's cancer class, and it includes, the next 2 Sundays we're doing the Neil Barnard cancer class in South Austin at Candace's home. It's going to be a workshop from 1 to 5, and it includes dinner both Sundays. It includes the book that you spoke about,
Straight Up Foods?
the guide, Neil Barnard's
Cancer
Survivor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're giving away that book, and we're gonna have, he's presenting, he goes deeper into the science, and then I do cooking demonstrations, and you get to eat the food.
And how do you register for that?
That is, it's on my Facebook page, My Food, Fitness, and Fun.
Chef Karen Osborne, myfoodfitnessandfun.com. Is that correct?
It's, sorry? It's on Facebook.
Chef Karen Osborne and
My Food, Fitness, and Fun.
myfoodfitnessandfun.com.
It's the page. Well, it's on just the Facebook page,
Oh, okay.
not the .com.
Okay.
And then it's on the AVVA meetup group.
Austin Vegetarian and Vegan Association, AVVA.
I shared it on ATX Alive when we
Oh,
first
okay.
put it out. I can try to share it again.
Okay.
Or I could share it on our private group and
Thank you.
on the main page.
And I can't remember if the cutoff date was tomorrow or Tuesday, but if you have trouble, just, I have a Gmail, it's Karen O. Rawchef @gmail.com. and I can send you stuff if that cuts you off.
And thank you to everybody who makes this community a resource to help people. And Roz.
Question about the omega-3s. For those of us who are choosing not to have the 1 ounce of nuts or seeds a day, but instead get it through the leafy greens, you talked about 2 servings a day. What constitutes a serving size?
Okay, her question is about omega-3 supplements. For those people who have decided not to have nuts and seeds in their diet, and she heard me say if you eat 2 servings a day of leafy greens, you'll get all the omega-3 that you need. And so a serving of leafy greens is half a cup. That's pretty small. I want to tell you how that works. The more fat that you eat overall, you're getting omega-6, the other essential fatty acid. And the more omega-6 you get, the worse your ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. And the more you inhibit an enzyme that turns the precursors into omega-3. So the more fat you eat, the more deficient in omega-3 you make yourself. So people who are deficient in omega-3 are not deficient because of insufficient intake of omega-3, usually. They're omega-3 deficient because of excess overall fat intake. So that's another reason why I don't eat oils and why I keep nuts and seeds to a minimum. I do eat nuts and seeds. You can't get a completely fat-free diet, and I'm not even aiming for that. You see, garbanzo beans are 16% of their calories from fat. Oats are 20% of their calories from fat. Kale, 13%, strawberries, 11%. And then there's black beans, 3% of their calories from fat. Some things are very low in fat. The goal is not fat-free, the goal is oil-free. Yes, Patty?
Does romaine lettuce count as a leafy green?
Romaine lettuce counts as leafy green. Nopalitos, okra, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, arugula. Yes, Ralph?
You haven't talked much about salt. Is there...
Salt. Salt is an independent risk factor for osteoporosis and cancer, but I use a little bit of salt when I'm trying to cook to get people off meat, dairy, and eggs because their taste buds are not adapted yet, and so I'm trying to help people to come on over to this way. So I'll use more fat, more sweetener, and not I don't use white sugar, but and more salt to try and get people. So if the salt-free thing is a big barrier for you, and that's probably the biggest addiction that I had to overcome, if the salt thing is a big barrier for you, use salt, because the fat in your diet is going to raise your blood pressure more than the salt in your diet. I'm not saying that salt is a health food, but if you need a little salt, it's far less harmful for you than the alcohol, the caffeine, the animal products, and the oil. But if you can do without salt, you're going to have better health. Yes, ma'am?
Is a serving size for anything half a cup?
No, it's different depending, but a cup, half cup, that's probably pretty good rough estimate. Yes, Rachel?
On that half cup thing, so do you have to, is it better if you spread the leafy greens out like different times of the day, or is
No.
eating one big salad a day sufficient so you don't have to eat it twice?
I'm not sure they've done studies on that, so I would only be guessing. Yeah, Ralph?
Is there a problem with eating too many greens? Like I have 3 big salads a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Nice. So he asked, is there a problem with eating too many greens? Well, there are people who desperately need to gain weight, and most of us are not among them, but there are some people who are very, very slender, and if they don't eat enough starches, they're not going to have the satiety and the energy and the lasting power. So greens are good, but greens are not the whole answer. There are some people who they have digestive troubles, especially at the beginning. They don't have the right bacteria. So eating too many greens, for them, they're going to get gas and bloating or green diarrhea.
I thought there was an issue with too much kale, some people would say.
Some people are sensitive to goitrogens, and there are leafy greens that can make the thyroid struggle harder, and some people are sensitive to those, and they need to limit those. Now, there's another leafy green, spinach, and some people are anemic, and they're iron deficient anemic. There's different kinds of anemia. And so people who are iron deficient, they suffer iron deficiency anemia, they need to limit their spinach in favor of the other greens because spinach is a little stingy with the iron. It's not that spinach is bad by any means. It's wonderful, but it's kind of like the favorite green. You know, everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people love baby spinach and find it easy to eat. But the anemic ones need Swiss chard, collard greens, beet greens, and they'll get more iron that way, and especially from their beans.
Also,
Yes,
I was wondering,
Linda?
my mother-in-law was told she needed more salt in her diet. So what does that mean?
The physicians are telling her she needs more salt in her diet. I apologize for the medical profession.
So that's never.
Now there are people who have a low sodium, and that low sodium is multifactorial. There are many reasons why her sodium is low. But your mother-in-law is probably not on the diet that you and I eat. Therefore, you know she's taken in way more salt than we are. So she's taken in more salt, but her sodium is lower. Well, sometimes sodium can be pushed low by high blood sugar. Sometimes it can be pushed low by kidney disease. Sometimes by brain diseases, brain tumors. There are many factors, and it takes a physician knowledgeable in plant-based diets and the power that they can do to help the person to find out why. Same with protein. Some people are low in protein. And of course, there's many doctors, I apologize, because on behalf of them, that say, oh, the reason your protein stores are low is because you're not eating enough protein. No, there are other reasons why they may have a low protein in their diet. And it takes a physician knowledgeable in this to help people. And speaking of physician knowledgeable, I'll get right to you, Nicholas. You may have seen recently a study came out that said the vegans have more hemorrhagic stroke than the non-vegans. And I understand why they would say that, because when you eat a diet without meat, dairy, eggs, oil, alcohol, caffeine, you are way less clotty than other people. And to be on blood thinners can be dangerous for people on plant-based diets. And so I'm not giving you medical advice here and saying stop your blood thinners, but you need to work with a physician who's knowledgeable, because if you stay on a blood thinner and you eat my way, your blood can be so thin that you are like overdosed on blood thinner, and you can get a hemorrhagic stroke, which can have devastating, it's very disabling to have a hemorrhagic stroke in some instances. Yes, Nicholas, you had a question.
Is there any reason not to eat white rice?
Is there any reason not to eat white rice? You know what? White rice doesn't have as much fiber and vitamins and calories as brown rice. White rice is nutritionally inferior to brown rice, but if you're in a situation and you haven't eaten before you went to the restaurant or the party or the graduation party or the baby shower or whatever, and you didn't bring food with you, which is a key to succeeding in this. You need to eat before you go, bring food with you, and all there is white rice. Yeah, eat that white rice. I mean, that's better for you. Have I eaten white rice? Yeah. This week? Yeah. Because do I eat white rice every week? No, it just happens that this week, the first time in about 10 years, yeah, I ate some white rice. Because we just recently moved. Our office is in the same building, but it's in a smaller space. And so, sometimes life catches up with you. And so if that's all they got, there you go, white rice. I mean, if you're in a restaurant and your flight is delayed and you've got this 6-hour layover and what they're selling is white rice with no oil in it, yeah, eat that. Yes, Karen?
Oh, I was just gonna offer on the salt thing. If you salt your food after it's cooked, don't cook with salt, and just use a little bit of salt. You're gonna get a whole lot of salt. If you're wondering how much salt or sodium you're getting, you can take half of a teaspoon of salt and put it in a little bowl. And when you make your meals, just sprinkle a little bit on your food during the day, and just see, you'll have probably more than half of that left over. And that half a teaspoon, I think that's the actual, about half of the daily recommended allowance.
Very good. For those who didn't hear, what she said is cooks salt the finish of the food. They don't. She doesn't cook with salt, but she sprinkles it on the end. And the reason she does that is to get it on your taste buds, so you can have more of the pow of the salt without getting as much quantity of the salt. And she said that you can measure out half a teaspoon of salt, put it in a little separate bowl, and then during the meal, if you need that, sprinkle that on, and you may have more than half of it left, and you'll see how much you're using. You have all been very attentive. Yes, Lita.
I have a friend who's attending I was just wondering if you ever heard of it. It's called the Optimum Health Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one in the Austin area, actually.
Bastrop.
A while with it. She's going to one in San Diego.
Uh-huh.
Have you heard of it?
I have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have one in Bastrop, at the Hyatt. Any other questions?
One more.
Yes, Nicholas.
Do you know any, or like, I've seen a lot of articles on like glycemic index.
Glycemic index.
So like a baked sweet potato, a lot of people are saying bad for diabetics. Is that true?
The glycemic index, it is a useful tool in some ways, and the glycemic index measures how quickly the blood sugar rises after a certain food. But you can't rely always on the glycemic index because meat is still in the stomach digesting for up to 8 hours later, and it's not even in the blood sugar 2 hours later. So meat scores very well on the glycemic index. High-fat foods score very well, unlike brown rice, which shoots the blood sugar up high. But, so if you went only by glycemic index criteria, you would never eat brown rice, you would eat meat. But we know that all the studies show that the more brown rice instead of meat, the better. I'm not saying that brown rice is the only thing. And Carol, did you have an announcement?
No question, but just a couple of things, when we're done with your.
Okay. All right. Let's open it up for open mic, and I'm going to ask Carol to come up and start. And we're going to ask people who have questions or want to make announcements to come to the microphone, and we have time to hear you.
Okay, hi. First of all, I have a giveaway. I saw a shirt last time I was here, this one, and I ordered the wrong size. I wasn't paying attention. So, how do we want to give away? Like who has been plant-based for less than 6 months?
Oh.
Okay.
What size is that
So
shirt?
keep your hand up nice and high. So how can we whittle that down to the next time? So who?
What size is your shirt?
I think it's a 10. Well, I'm a 10, so I think it's an 8-10. It's a small. Some of those small, medium, large things, the sizes don't match up to what they're. Anyway, I think this is like an 8-10. So less than 6 months.
Is there anyone who would like to have that shirt who is new here for the first time?
Yes, or a first timer. There we go.
Let's give it to Laura. All right, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't see your hand over there. Very good. Wear it with pride.
That's number one. Everybody know where Seguin is? It's northeast of San Antonio. Their pod, so the equivalent of our gathering, is this coming Thursday. I'm heading down there. I'll be their guest speaker. I'm going to be talking about how eating plants is better for the planet, because how we produce food and the burden our food production system puts on the planet. So I'll be talking about that. If anyone wants to go, I'm happy to carpool, so reach out to me afterwards and we can figure out how to hook up.
This is Carol Whitaker. She has a wonderful presentation.
So really cool. And then finally, yes, so building on that, if any of you are new to this journey and you have communities and friends and neighbors that you would like to have someone, a neutral third party, come in and explain the science of plant-based eating, I'd be happy to come in and do a presentation for you. I've done it in private living rooms on the smart TV, or in a local library, an office building. There's all different places. All I need is a place to present, like a TV screen, with sound, video, and then that's all I need. So please reach out to me afterwards, and it's totally free. It doesn't cost you anything. Happy to share the information.
Wow.
Awesome.
All right.
There's one lady here who told me that she had lost quite a bit of weight in her first 100 days on the plant-based diet, and her cholesterol had plunged a significant amount. And I don't know if that person is still here and if she wants to tell it.
She's not here.
She's not here.
It went from 435 down to whatever normal is her cholesterol level.
Okay, so her cholesterol came down from the 400s
Yeah.
to a normal level of cholesterol in 100 days.
Yeah, 90 days after.
90 days. That's wonderful. Thank you, Bonnie, for turning your daughter on to the plant-based diet. I'm very proud of you. Very good. Very good. Is there anyone who would like to come up and say what the plant-based diet has done specifically for their health? Is there anyone who would like to say that? Like me with my asthma, reversing my asthma. Oh, come, Carol. Come back.
So, about 8.5 years ago, I've spent decades struggling with obesity. I used to be over size 22, over 240. I had early stage cervical cancer and prediabetes. And I learned about the plant-based science because a friend pointed me to a book called The China Study by T. Colin Campbell. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend you read that book. And that sent me on a rat hole of research and study, and I watched Forks Over Knives, Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead. I read a couple of other books, and to cut a long story short, so September 12th, 2011, I went cold turkey because I don't have an off switch, so I can't just wean myself off. I said I'm going to suck it up for 3 or 4 weeks. I'm probably not going to be a happy camper because I'm cleaning myself out of all the junk that I was eating. And sure enough, it wasn't the most pleasant experience. I was a crappy wife and everything else. Anyway, cut a long story short, I've never gone back. So it's been 8+ years, totally plant-based, whole food. Absolutely love it, how I feel. I just feel like $1 million all the time. My numbers are right where they need to be. I cannot recommend it enough. So if you've struggled with any of those things, we're all here to help you. Reach out to any of us. This is a community we're here to lean on. So please, just, it's the best decision you will ever make.
Yes, I agree. Okay, don't want to keep you too long. Is there anything else before we go that we need to announce or say? Thank you so much for coming, and have yourself a great month. And next month we have Beth Summers coming, and she's a PhD, and she's going to talk the third Sunday of November. And I want to put a shout out for Ken and Mouse's group in San Antonio. Ken, when do you have your plant-based potluck?
The second Thursday of every month. We start meet and greet at 5:45. It's on the San Antonio College campus at this building called Eco Centro, devoted to sustainability.
Thank you. And is there a website they can go to, or is there an email, or how can they?
Get Healthy San Antonio Facebook.
Get Healthy San Antonio on Facebook. Thank you, Ken and Mouse, for all that you do. And yes, tell me.
We do also Plant for Your Pod in Yoakum, Texas.
Yoakum, Texas. Where is that near?
An hour and a half heading east.
An hour and a half heading east, okay.
So ours is always the third Tuesday of each month.
Okay, the third Tuesday. How can they connect with you, Angela?
The Whole Food Way.
The Whole Food Way.
On Facebook.
On Facebook. Okay, Whole Food Way on Facebook. Thank you, Angela. All right, thank you, everyone. Go out there and live the healthiest life you can.